I trained with the master for a while before I had to leave, but I had to leave Cambodia. The book that finally came out of all of that was called Rediscovering the Khmers, and that's the book that marks all of those different adventures all the way through the country. And it's just got a little bit of Bokator in it, so please don't buy it just for the Bokator. Buy it because you want to know about Cambodian culture. And I called it Rediscovering the Khmers because I feel like the Khmers always knew where they were. It's just the West who forgot about them. So we're rediscovering them. We're not discovering them. And the same thing for Angkor Wat, and the same thing for Bokator. So I have been called the discoverer of Bokator, but obviously Grandmaster knew where it was right along. He didn't need me to discover it. I left Cambodia, and man, I went home for a speaking tour. And then I was completely out of money. I went to Korea to work for a while. And during all this, I came up with the idea for the Martial Arts Odyssey TV show. And I wanted it to be a TV show, an actual, on one of the cable networks or whatever. So I wrote proposals, and I'd been sending them to all the different networks. And basically, there was a little interest, and a few of them called me, and then they didn't call me, and nothing happened. And then when the first story ran in Black Belt magazine, which I wrote about Bokator, it was the first story published about Bokator in 1,000 years, and the first story ever published outside of Cambodia about Bokator. And suddenly I started getting calls, and BBC called me about I think on 3 or 4 different shows that all wanted to do something on Bokator. Then several other BBC shows called me because they wanted to do something on Muay Thai. A couple of them called me because they wanted to go to Shaolin Temple, and Discovery, History Channel, production companies representing all those different networks in the States. They started calling me, and I consulted on a lot of TV shows. And every time they would call me, I would consult, and I'd give them information, and they'd buy my books, or read the articles, or ask me for photos. And they wanted to come to Asia and train, and I would pitch Martial Arts Odyssey, and nothing happened with Martial Arts Odyssey, and I was getting nothing out of any of this. So I was in Korea, and I really hated Korea, and I was really depressed the whole time I was there. And the phone rings, and it's a production company based out of the United States representing one of the major networks, and they want to do a show. They call me up and they go, we have this original idea for a show. It's about these 2 guys that go around the world training in different martial arts, and each week we'll do a different country, different martial art. And we'd like you to consult on the show. And I just exploded. I was having a hard time anyway, and it just exploded. I go, that's my show. That's Martial Arts Odyssey. I wrote that. And I wrote the proposal for that. And in fact, that was one of the networks that I pitched the proposal to. And next thing I know, their lawyers are calling me, and they're basically saying, look, we didn't know you'd pitch this, which is probably true. I mean, come on, a network's massive. I mean, who knows who read my proposal, right? I mean, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but at the time I was just really upset. But they're like, look, we didn't see your proposal, we don't know about your proposal, and they sent me some documents, and they said, you need to sign this thing that says basically you're not going to sue us for stealing your idea. So I signed it, sent it back, and then they hired me for as a consultant, and then they had me write one episode of the show where the 2 guys would go to Cambodia and train and fight and whatnot. And still, I was trying. The show hadn't aired yet. The show hadn't started, and I don't know if it didn't have a title or if they just didn't want to tell me the title. But so I didn't actually know what the name of the show was. But the show hadn't aired yet, so I said, look, you're really stuck with these 2 guys that you picked as a host. I go, look, you've got me now. You know about me. I've actually trained with all these masters, and I've written books, and I've written magazine articles, and I'm a little bit famous, and put me on the show. I could lead the guys, and I'll save you gazillions of dollars in scouting fees because I already know all the masters. And I mapped out about 15 episodes that I wanted to do and sent it to them, and they went through the motions of sort of, calling me and not screen testing, was sort of listening to my voice and looking at my photos and things. And finally they just said, look, there's 2 issues. One is you're too old, and 2 is we just want someone who has never been in Asia before. They said having someone who's been in Asia and speaks all the languages, knows all the masters, the folks at home won't be able to relate to that. So we're going to go with 2 lunkheads who don't know anything. And that was my first brush with Hollywood. That show wound up having its premiere while I was stuck in Laos. I was stuck in Laos. This is years later, 2-3 years later. I'm in Laos and I have absolutely no money. And I'm looking at my watch. It's like 10:45. If I don't pay the hotel by 11:30, I have to move out. And I have no money. I have no place to go. And I have, I think, 30 or 40 baht, which is a little over $1 left. And I'm trying to use it to call people to beg them to please go put some money in my bank account or in my PayPal so that I could draw some money out and go pay for my hotel and survive. And when I opened my internet, when I opened the email there from a guy who read one of my books, Antonio, I read your book, I think you'd like this new TV show that just aired last night in America, and he sent it to me, and I opened it, and it was the show. It was the show I had worked on, the one I had read. It wasn't the episode, it wasn't the Cambodia episode, but it was that show. And seeing those two guys getting paid to go pretend to live my real life. I mean, think about this. You're too old. It's not believable. Well, but it's real, but I'm really doing it. And anyway, the other funny thing was that the network decided not to air the Cambodia episode that I had written because they said it was too dangerous. And they didn't want their stars to be in danger by sending them to Cambodia, so that show never aired. So it's not the one you're thinking of if you're a fan of all the stuff that's on TV. Back to Korea. So I'm sitting there in Korea. I've been paid to write this one show for Cambodia, but that's it. Nothing else coming in. Phone rings, and it's Tim Peck. He was a Khmer refugee. He was born, I think, gosh, he's a little younger than me, so I guess he was born during or just before the genocide, and he lived in a refugee camp in Thailand, and then his family resettled in Australia, and he became a film producer. And obviously he's very interested in Khmer issues. So when we were doing the movie Krabai Lekon, he read about the movie in Black Belt magazine. So he contacted me, and he said, listen, I'm a filmmaker. I don't know how I can help you, but anything I can do, I can help. And also at that time he didn't have money, or he didn't have free time, so he couldn't even come to Cambodia. He goes, what can I help you with? By email. And it turned out that we needed someone to do graphics design and do a website for the movie and do the posters and all that. So Tim Peck did all of that stuff. We communicated a lot almost every day during that time. We got to be friends, but it was all by email. We never met. So I'm in Korea, and Tim Peck calls me, and we'd always sort of said, someday we'll do a movie, and Antonio, you'll write it and be in it, and and I'll make it, and Tim Peck will make it and direct it, and so it just seemed like a really good match. And Tim contacted me when I was in Korea, and he goes, listen, I have a week off that I can come to Cambodia and shoot a movie. Do you have a script? And I go, okay. I didn't have a script. I basically wrote it on the plane. And, he wanted to shoot a movie about Bokator. So I was working in Korea, and they have this big holiday called Chuseok, and we were going to have 3 or 4 days holiday anyway, and I go, look, I just want to take an extra day or two, and this way I could spend like 10 days in Cambodia filming this movie. And they said, no, impossible. So I said, all right, let me rephrase this. I already bought my ticket. If you want to fire me, you fire me, and when I get back, I'll just move my stuff out of the apartment. And the director comes back to me like, we have decided to grant you permission to go to Cambodia. I'm like, yeah, right. So anyway, I went to Cambodia, and I met Tim Peck, and we hit it off just as well in person as we had on the internet, and we made a movie. And it was really funny because we were torn between wanting to make like a movie with a story and wanting to make a documentary about Bokator. So we decided just to shoot tons and tons and tons of B-roll that we'd use for documentary, and then we also shot this little story called I forgot what we called it, Brooklyn Bokator, and it hasn't aired yet, but the trailer is available on YouTube, but the movie hasn't come out yet. Tim had also done another movie called The Red Sense, which was about a girl living in Australia who finds out that the guy who killed her father during the Khmer Rouge is alive, and that he's been resettled in Australia. Like he took off his Khmer Rouge uniform and just went into the UN camp and said, I'm a refugee, and they resettled him in Cambodia. So she finds out he's still alive, and he's living in Sydney or Melbourne, and she's torn with, should she kill him or should she forgive him? That's an amazing movie called The Red Sense, and Tim was working on that. He came to Cambodia to shoot our Bokator movie. And apparently Bokator just wound up getting put on the back burner and hasn't been edited yet, so I'm really hoping he'll get that edited, because I just get email all the time, people waiting for this movie to come out.